Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Answers from the Lab, where we share Mayo Clinic knowledge and advancements on the state of testing and science from laboratory leaders and the people who are making it happen behind the scenes. I'm Dr. Bobbi Pritt, Interim Chair of the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. With me today is Dr. Bill Morice, the President and CEO of Mayo Clinic Laboratories. This is our weekly discussion with Dr. Morice, in which we learn about updates in the field of laboratory medicine and pathology.
Hi, Bill. Good to see you this week.
Yeah, good to see you too. I'm in semi-vacation mode, as you can see, with the more relaxed clothing up here at the cabin.
Well, thank you for joining us on your vacation. It's always
it's my
one
pleasure.
of the highlights of my week. So, and there's just always so much going on that we could talk about. One of the things that really caught my eye with so much going on in the media and summits coming up is artificial intelligence. And in fact, in just next week, the Mayo Clinic is having an AI summit. So AI is such a hot topic. And you heard a lot about it when you were at the platform meeting as well.
Yeah. So there was a platform. So Mayo had a platform. It was a Mayo-sponsored conference called Platform Med. It's about platform transformation in medicine, which of course is a focal point for Mayo Clinic's Bold Forward strategy going, that under Dr. Perugia. But it's really quite remarkable to think about, it was only a year and a half ago at Becker's that I first heard about large language models and people saying this was going to be the next transformational computing revolution, and then how quickly we're hearing about different companies, and of course the application in healthcare, because healthcare there is so much data and more than it's really quite overwhelming, right? So it seems a logical space to really apply the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll just start with the basics for the people who are listening. AI, of course, is artificial intelligence, although a colleague of mine, Dr. DeBacca, likes the term augmented information because it's not true human intelligence yet. It's still driven and trained by humans and can't think independently. But boy, it's getting closer with these large language models and generative AI, where it can generate things based on its training set. One thing that I believe in at this point, AI is not going to replace us, but lab leaders who use AI will replace those who don't. It's going to be a very important tool in our future. And I think that we need to cautiously embrace it and also be at the table making sure that it is deployed in ways that are ethical and fair and protect patient privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hearing a lot about it. And I think as we go into the fall, it's hard to believe we're thinking about that, but we're already halfway through the summer.
Oh, yeah, don't talk about the fall yet.
I won't talk about the fall, but we know that's when there's a lot of academic meetings happen October, November. So that we'll probably be hearing more and more about these sorts of things in laboratory medicine and healthcare. There's been a few publications that have really caught people's eyes. I think there was one out of the Harvard system around a large language model, foundational model, they now call them, for pathology, that could read pathology slides, as for instance, and then at the platform conference you mentioned, there was a whole session on businesses. I mean, there's been just a proliferation of businesses in this space around healthcare. But to your point, the large language models themselves are changing so quickly. I mean, we're already in ChatGPT 4.0, and with each iteration, they get better at, quote, reading human material, human content.
Yes, so and generating human content.
Exactly. Yes. So it's going to be quickly moving. We're going to hear a lot, but I think that, and the reality is we have to embrace the technology just like anything else in the laboratory to really understand its application, where it's really going to help, and also some of the pitfalls, because we're going to see a lot of again, exciting possibilities, but those will really need to be borne out through clinical application. You hear about the term hallucination, AI hallucination.
Right.
Sometimes it starts to fill in the blanks on its own. It can be biased by the data that's used to train the model. So there's still a lot. And I know you have real world experience in the lab on using these technologies, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I could tell everyone a little bit about that. So what we're using is not a foundation model. It's not generative AI, but we're using deep learning, a deep neural network or convoluted neural network that is supposed to, it's built on a way that imitates the way the human mind works. It's not quite there, but it has deep learning. It's more complex, and it can analyze images. It breaks it down into pieces that it can analyze, and it can find objects of interest. And we've been working with a company called TechSite that Mayo Clinic is now partnering with. And we've talked about this before on this podcast, where we've been using their product for finding parasites in stool specimens, which is really that metaphorical needle in the haystack. 95% of our specimens are negative. So you're trying to find those rare positives. We're now also using it for gram stains, and we've implemented that clinically. And we're also looking at other applications for acid-fast bacilli and maybe fungi in the future. But when you implement this sort of thing, first of all, you have to prepare your lab for it. You want to get the lab involved. You really want them to be at the table helping make decisions so that you get their buy-in. You want to have your lab staff be part of the evaluation and then implementation process. But then you also need to measure success. What does success look like? It's great if you've implemented a new tool, and of course it has to perform analytically, but there's so many other things you can measure. And we just gathered a whole bunch of this data, Bill. I could tell you about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So, first of all, when we implemented the algorithm for finding parasites in stool specimens, we were being inundated with specimens because as COVID hit and lab staff started retiring, a lot of people that were doing parasite exam retired, and a lot of labs started sending that type of testing to us. And all of a sudden, we were just getting swamped with all these specimens. We couldn't keep up, and our turnaround time had gone up to almost 2 weeks, which was really unacceptable for us. We usually wanted to keep our turnaround time to about a couple days. From the point we implemented this deep learning neural network, it dropped down. You could just see this precipitous decrease. It looked like, Mount Everest. It was going up, and then it just boom went right down. And now we're down to our 2-day turnaround time again. And it was right at the point where we implemented it. And importantly, our volumes are still really high. The volumes are high. We're taking in more volume than ever, and we have capacity to take on more. And yet our turnaround time is right down where we want it. So that's one thing to measure. Great. But what about staff satisfaction? So we planned on this knowing that we wanted to look at staff satisfaction before and after we implemented AI. You have to plan ahead if you're going to measure some of these things. And we looked at across multiple different areas. We asked questions such as ergonomic challenges, difficulty of work, job satisfaction, physical demand, mental demand. And everything got better, except initially the mental demand went up a little bit too, as the staff were learning the new system. Economic strain went down, physical strain went down, time pressure went down, difficulty of work went down, and performance satisfaction doubled. So we were really pleased with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that, it really goes back to when you said that, will AI replace laboratory medicine professionals and pathologists and doctors? I think the answer to that is no. What it allows us to do, though, is honestly scale our knowledge. I mean, that's what we were all struggling with, I think, not just at Mayo, but across our profession. More work coming in, fewer people being trained, understanding a lot of times just where is it that in when you have such a high volume of stuff coming at you, cases or whatever, where can you be most effective in intervening for the patient? I mean, to me, what the beauty of AI and digitization and all those things is it really allows us to scale our knowledge and interact with the content in a meaningful way. And that's what your use case really bore out. And I remember having those conversations with you. I was still department chair at the time and thinking and hoping that this implementation would help the lab, which was really getting, one of the many that was really getting under a lot of strain. So it's great to see. And I think the bottom line then is that we will not be replaced by AI, but those who use AI type tools will eventually replace those who do not. I think is really where things are going to, I think, as you said as well. But the reality is the promise can only be delivered if we actually focus on, it has to be, as you described, thinking as lead in the lab and bringing the technology in and really understanding where it can make a difference, and then to see if it really does.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we also have to consider where it will really make a difference. This was a perfect use case. Parasites, this rare event detection where you you're doing a high volume of specimens, but a very small percentage would actually be positive. A similar phenomenon occurs with cytotechnologists and pap smears, and you're just looking for those positives. You don't want to miss a positive, but most of what you're looking at is negative. So you deal with ergonomic strain of sitting at a microscope and just screening negative after negative. There's low job satisfaction, and humans are susceptible to interruptions and distractions. The phone rings, you forget where you are, and if you screened a slide or not. The computer doesn't do that. But on the bonus side, in the way we're using AI, when we find a positive, then the human, our skilled and trained technologists, get to spend their time and effort really looking at that positive, which is what they enjoy, and ensuring that it's correctly identified. So I'm not surprised job satisfaction went up. We're using people to the highest level of their degree, really challenging them with these positives. And we get high enough volume that we have positives every day. This just helps find those positives so they can spend their time with them. Now, what you wouldn't want to do, though, is apply AI to a bad work stream to begin with.
Yes.
Just like automation, don't automate a bad process.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. When you said that computers don't get interrupted, but they don't know our workflows, right? And they also don't know when they might be biased by the information that they're receiving, right? So that's the other thing. As these things get trained, we're learning that you really need to have a very complete data. You need, if you're going to apply an algorithm to screen for cervical cancer, it might perform different in different ethnicities. It might perform differently where HPV is more prevalent. So, and the computer's not going to know that. So we need to continue to interact with it. It's another tool that we have to continue to understand and refine for its use in helping us deliver good care to patients.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to Taiwan in a couple weeks, and I'll be presenting on this, and I'll get to see what they're doing in their laboratories, which will be really quite interesting as well. And internationally, people have access to different systems. The TechSite system we're using is actually CE marked in Europe. Of course, here we validated it as a laboratory developed test, but there'll be more of these. There'll be more FDA approved tests coming.
Yeah, there'll be the regulatory angle. There'll be the international angle. I'll be in Saudi Arabia later this month, or I guess in July. It's not quite July yet. Maybe when people listening to this, so then it would be later this month. But yeah, and then part of what I'm doing is just understanding how they want to use, because a lot of these countries in emerging markets or even established markets are seeing AI as a way to improve care delivery in their countries. So and then there's the regulatory piece.
Oh gosh, yeah, let's not get into that. But, I think it's important, and we will have to talk about it. But I like what you just said, Bill, that this is something that comes back to what we've discussed before, which is healthcare equity. Also meeting the needs of people around the world as we see areas that are so-called healthcare deserts where we're losing staff and there's not enough people. This is potentially a way to get high quality diagnostics into areas that perhaps wouldn't have access otherwise. You have the option for virtual care. AI, when something's uploaded to the cloud, can be read anywhere. So this might help with global access to good diagnostics as well.
Yes, it could help. I totally agree. And so it holds a lot of promise. But the most important thing is that we stay engaged, and actually those things will come up. Regulation is another area where it's going to move fast. Is our regulatory system even prepared to ingest that? And the other thing that comes up is payment. How do we get? And so those are the more practical issues that hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss as well. But it is I have to say, it's a super exciting time to be in our profession, I think.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. Well, more to come.
More to come. Have a great holiday week coming up, and we'll continue to chat.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Answers from the Lab. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, and don't forget to tune in every Thursday and every other Tuesday.